إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Brothers and sisters in Islam, as children, we are taught many stories. Some of them are to put us to sleep. Others of them are to entertain us. And the best of them are those that teach us morals and manners. Brothers and sisters, one of the best stories that we were told as children is the story of the ant and the grasshopper. The grasshopper would live day by day. Each day when he needed something, he would go out and fetch it. And this was the same whether it was winter or summer. Whereas the ant, it was the opposite. The ant would always prepare for the future. Whether it was in the summer or in the winter, he was always preparing for it. And like is our situation out here today, in such days during the winter, it is very hard to prepare for that day. And if you did not prepare for it in advance, you would not succeed in your daily tasks. And such, the ant was successful and the grasshopper was unsuccessful. Because when winter time came, the grasshopper had not planned for it. And he had not gathered the food that he needed. And he had not prepared his shelter. Whereas the ant had gathered its food. It had its shelter ready, so when winter came, it was able to do what it had to do to survive. Brothers and sisters, this story teaches a very important lesson. And that is the lesson of preparing for the future. And this is something that our Sharia and the text of the Quran and the Sunnah actually incite in us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Hashr, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَلْتَنْظُرْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ لِغَدٍ. That, O you who believe, let fear Allah and let every soul look forth to what it is coming tomorrow. Meaning prepare what is coming for tomorrow. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah is specifically referring to the day of judgment. It's specifically referring to the day of judgment. He says, prepare for the day of judgment. But we have a principle in tafsir that lessons from ayahs are not derived due to their context. Meaning that even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specified Yawm al-Qiyamah for this ayah, it doesn't mean that we can't use this ayah in other instances as well. It says, الْعِبْرَةُ بِعُمُومِ اللَّفْظِ لَا بِخُصُوصِ السَّبَبِ. That we derive lessons not due to the context of revelation, but due to what we can derive from the generality of the wording. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, let every soul look forth to what it is putting forth for tomorrow. Brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to prepare for the future. And it is of great sadness that this ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has forgotten this concept. And specifically the community of Montreal, and even more specifically the community of the South Shore. And I will expand on it even further. But let us take another example. A man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, Ya Rasulullah, mata as-sa'a. Ya Rasulullah, when is the hour going to come? When is Yawm al-Qiyamah going to happen? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam could have told him, it's going to happen in 10 years. It's going to happen in 100 years. It's going to happen in 600 years. But rather than telling him and putting the man in a state where he would become unprepared, in a state where he would not be worrisome, he told him, وَمَا أَعْدَدْتَ لَهَا. And what have you prepared for it? He asked him, what have you prepared for Yawm al-Qiyamah? Again, the Prophet ﷺ is inciting that concept of planning and preparing for the future. Brothers and sisters, in order to achieve any goal in our lives and achieve any objective, we have to first figure out what our objective and goal is. And then after that, we have to take practical steps towards it. Now let us look at the state of this ummah in Montreal. In Montreal, we have close to 100,000 Muslims. 100,000 Muslims. And in the South Shore, we have 2 masajid now. And each masjid will approximately get, let's say, about 7,000 people or 5,000 people for Eid Salah. And each of them will have children. And each of them will have brothers and sisters. And each of them will have aunties and uncles and mothers and fathers. Yet why is it this community of the South Shore, with all of its Muslim population, has still not established a Muslim school yet? Why is it that this community in the South Shore still cannot agree as to which day they will celebrate Eid together? Why is it that we have so many Muslim engineers and accountants, yet we have no Muslim firms to employ them? Why is it we have so many Muslim doctors, yet we do not have a Muslim hospital as of yet? Brothers and sisters, it's because no one takes the time to plan. When our wives get pregnant, when our sisters get pregnant, and we have to take them to a non-Muslim gynecologist, or we have to take them to a male gynecologist, do we not feel that pain? Why is it that pain only lasts for a few moments? Why doesn't that pain last forever? Such that we would build those Muslim hospitals so that we can serve the needs of our sisters in Islam. And we don't have to degrade them by going to male doctors. Brothers and sisters, this is something to think about. Each individual has a responsibility of thinking about goals and objectives. What goals do you want to achieve in your life? Jannah is the ultimate aspiration for each individual. And that is a beautiful aspiration. But likewise, you have to think about yourselves and your community and your family. What have you done for them? Is it enough that you just provide bread and butter for them on the tables? Brothers and sisters, this is not enough. If you do not look after your families, and do not educate them, and do not grant them the tarbiyah that they need to live in such a society, you are destinating them for destruction. You yourselves are plotting a path for their destruction. Brothers and sisters, think about this. That you raise an individual. You have your young Muslim sister, your young daughter. You want her to grow up as a good Muslimah. A Muslimah who will protect her chastity. A Muslimah who knows how to interact with other individuals. A Muslimah who knows just as much about her deen as she knows about her dunya. Yet when you don't send her to a Muslim school, and you don't encourage her to keep Muslim friends, how do you expect to achieve this goal? Islam will not be attained overnight, but rather it takes time. When you look at the example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the revelation of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the Quran for 13 years in Mecca, increasing the iman of the Muslims. For 13 years, this is all that was happening. Increasing of iman. No ahkam of the sharia, no rulings of sharia, no rulings of fiqh were revealed during that time. And then after their iman had increased, that is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them about prohibitions and permissibility. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He prohibited alcohol, He didn't just tell the believers, stop drinking alcohol. Because it wasn't logical at that time. People who were addicted to something, you can't tell them to leave it overnight. But you increase their iman. And at the same time, you say, don't drink it when you're coming to salah. This is something feasible. This is something that they can achieve. And likely this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited alcohol and prohibited the other prohibitions. And such we have to be with our children. That when you raise them up, you teach them about Islam. You teach them about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You teach them about Jannah and Jahannam. And you do this for 13, 14 years. And then you let them live in a society like this, and yes, they might survive. But when you leave your children uneducated, when you don't take the time to teach them what they need to know to survive, brothers and sisters, you might as well throw them in a well, because you are leading them towards destruction. And now many people may think that building an Islamic school in the South Shore is something unfeasible. But let me remind you of the statement of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he said, Allahu inda dhanni abdi. That indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is as the slave thinks of him. So if you think as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as someone who is merciful, and someone you can rely upon, and someone who will help you in your goals, then you will find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in such a state. But an individual who thinks that he is doomed and everything he does is, doomed and there is no future for it, and he is someone who is very pessimistic, then thus his results will be the same. He will have no objectives, and then he will thus be left to achieve no objectives as well. Brothers and sisters, there's a famous saying, even in English philosophy, that he who fails to plan, plans to fail. That those people who don't take the steps to plan events and plan their goals and objectives, it is as if they are planning to fail, meaning that they do not want anything else other than failure. So now think about all the objectives. Think about what this community needs. We mentioned a Muslim hospital. Again, we have so many Muslim